Hi students, this is going to be a short video to introduce you to the theories and to introduce you to ways of thinking in sociology of sport. So the first thing we're going to do is watch this pretty new Nike video that I've just now posted under Learning Bundle 1 in case you wanted to see it again later.
This is Chris Mosier. Morning, Chris.
Morning.
Chris is the first transgender athlete to make the men's national team. Hey, Chris, how'd you know you'd be fast enough to compete against men?
I didn't.
Or strong enough?
I didn't.
Yeah, but how'd you know the team would accept you?
I didn't.
Or that you'd even be allowed to compete?
I didn't.
That must have been tough. Didn't you ever just want to give up?
Yeah, but I didn't.
Okay, so that ad was about Chris Mosier, who probably you maybe haven't heard of before, who is the first transgender athlete to actually make a national team in duathlon, which is similar to triathlon, but it's duathlon. So you could see in the commercial it was biking and running. So before we go forward, I'd like you to write down a couple of questions that you would ask about that commercial from really any perspective. So what comes to mind? So I'm going to pause here for 20 seconds and let you write down some questions. Okay, so probably some of your questions were guessing about where did Nike air this ad? How come I haven't seen it before? What were the main points of the advertisement? And possibly a bit about how Chris Mosier himself has managed to become this competitive as a trans athlete. So I use this as just an example that thinking in this class is often about the experiences of groups in sport and physical activity, not the experiences of individuals necessarily. Although Chris Mosier's story would certainly be part of an interesting study on trans athletes who have been successful in mainstream sports. But the kinds of questions that we ask are often about things like what are the messages of Nike? Nike as a multinational corporation, what do they have to lose or to gain through creating commercial spaces like this? They have a whole series of advertisements in the similar vein. So what I wanted to do was sort of make a connection between the Chris Mosier ad and the theories that I have asked you to read about this week. So we have the functionalist, conflict, and critical theories. So if we think about these theories as sort of like worldviews, like, so how do people see sport overall? So functionalists would see sport and physical activity as something that is working really well in our society right now. There are great lessons that are learned from sport, how to win and how to lose, and that it's good for everyone and most people have a great experience in it. Those in the conflict theory tend to focus on the commercialism exclusively, that sport has been, and recreation has literally been taken over by commercial interests, and that things like the Super Bowl or even down to Little League boys baseball or girls softball, it's all about commercialism. Everybody has to buy the same equipment and the uniforms and contribute to the economy, and that athletes' bodies aren't the most important part of sport. And that critical perspective would ask more questions about power and who has the power. So in relationship to the Chris Mosier advertisement, we would look at Nike as holding the power there in terms of making the message, but also perhaps the athlete himself has some power in that situation. So if we look at, there's a chart in the chapter 2 theory chapter that sort of breaks down the strengths, weaknesses, and main ideas of the theories that I want you to pay attention to. So we have the functionalist and the conflict theory on this page, and then on the next page, the critical theory. So as I said before, the assumptions are in functionalist that sport order is based on consensus and shared values being things like sport is really good for kids, they learn how to win and lose. The major concerns about functionalists is how does sport contribute to other needs within the system, like government, education, how does sport fit into those other institutions in society? How does it contribute to social life? And overall, the values shared is that it's a valuable social institution at many, many levels. The idea behind functionalists would be to have programs expanded to promote traditional ideas of winning and losing, and the other values sort of inherent in sport, which unfortunately in this country has to do with sort of authoritarian coaches and athletes not making a lot of choices. The weaknesses is that it doesn't acknowledge that not everyone has a positive experience in sport and recreation. You can just look around at how many people are sedentary to sort of see that it ignores that. Not everyone has a positive experience. And that sports are actually social constructions, that sports are created, and the idea of sports, even the rules, are created by humans and can also be changed by humans. So a functionalist perspective on the Chris Mosier ad would probably look at and think, well, Nike's trying to sort of fit into what sport means as a social system right now in our culture, and that is trans athletes are a part of that. However, not a big part. So it would be sort of a question for functionalist theory about functionalist theorists, why would Nike consider making that sort of ad? They must think it fits somehow into the social structure. So if we look at conflict theory, social order is based on almost purely economic interests and exploiting the labor of athletes. And one of the critiques of conflict theory, if you look down here, is that it overstates economic forces actually. But overall looks at sport as a way to almost privilege those already in a higher social class and sort of keep people in a lower socioeconomic class sort of out of some of the elite sports, but also just spending money on sport as a way to forget about their own life. So here it says sport is an opiate that distracts attention away from the problems that affect those without economic power. So how conflict theorists would maybe look at Nike, the commercial, as a multinational corporation would be, well, Nike's just out to make money. So if there's another segment of the population that might buy Nike products, and Nike can end up looking like a caring multinational corporation, then it would make sense that they might spend money on a commercial like that. And lastly, down here, conflict theory. The struggle over ideology, representation, and power. So that this is a much more diverse, larger theory. The other two theories are considered structuralist theories, so looking at society as a structure. And conflict theory is much more open and diverse, and that is actually one of the critiques as well when you look at the weaknesses, that confusing vocabularies and the guidelines are a little bit unclear. But so they agree here in critical theory, sports are a site of social constructions where culture is produced and reproduced. So who tells us what a trans athlete even is? Who makes the rules about what men and women can do in sport or trans athletes can do? And then how is power relations organized? Who gets to sit at the table when big decisions are made? Whose voices are represented more than others? So of course, a critical theorist might look at the Chris Mosier commercial and have many different ways to look at it. Perhaps from the trans athlete's perspective, this may be one of the most well-known trans athletes. From a different critique, they might do a similar critique to the conflict theorist. Maybe Nike's just out to make money on this venture and appeal to as many consumers as possible. That's potentially true as well. So hopefully that gives you at least a little bit of more understanding of the theories at this point. And I will have another presentation about the concept maps.